Have you ever paused to truly ask what the mind is? Not how it works or what it does, but what it is. We often use three words interchangeably: brain, mind, and consciousness, but they refer to different layers of our being. The brain is physical, around 1.3 kgs of tissue made up of neurons, chemicals, and electrical signals. It can be scanned, dissected, and studied. The mind, on the other hand, is what the brain does. It isn't a place, but a process. Thinking, remembering, imagining, deciding. It's like software running on the brain's hardware. Then there's consciousness, something different still. It's not about the system's functions, but about what it feels like to be that system. It's the raw experience of awareness. The mind exists between the brain and consciousness. It's where experience is shaped, where patterns form, where the world is made understandable. From an evolutionary viewpoint, the mind wasn't designed for solving equations or writing poetry. It developed to help organisms survive by simulating the world internally before acting. It allows for imagination, planning, hesitation, learning, replacing instinct with thoughtful choice. This ability gave organisms like us a powerful edge. But the mind grew beyond survival. It became a space for memory, language, creativity, and self-reflection, a place where we carry not just the world, but ourselves. Still, we don't experience reality directly. We experience the mind's version of it, filtered by focus, shaped by emotion, colored by memory. Each mind builds its own reality and lives inside it. And the mind is always changing. It adapts, rewires, learns, and evolves. The mind you had a year ago is not the same one you have today. So what is the mind? It's not just your thoughts, your memories, or even your identity. It's the system that holds all of those together long enough for you to say, me. You can't see the mind, but everything you see through it. Understanding what the mind truly is doesn't just start the journey, it shapes it. Origins of mind. It's one thing to ask what the mind is. It's another to ask how it came to exist at all. The earliest forms of life had no thoughts or memories, just basic chemical reactions and simple reflexes. A jellyfish drifts through the water without a brain. A worm recoils from light without understanding what light even is. But eventually, reacting wasn't enough. Survival started favoring something more powerful: anticipation. The ability to move toward food before sensing it, to avoid danger before feeling pain. This shift, from reacting to predicting, marked the beginning of the mind. Nervous systems evolved to handle more complex information. Neurons began forming networks. Primitive light-sensitive cells became full eyes. Reflexes developed into responses, and those responses became strategies. Minds didn't create brains. Instead, minds emerged when brains became complex enough to simulate the world internally and choose deliberate actions over automatic reactions. Over time, creatures gained more than just sensations. They developed inner maps of their surroundings, dangers, opportunities, possible outcomes. The world was no longer something to simply react to. It became something to think about. This gave rise to thought, which replaced trial and error. Awareness developed gradually, not all at once. growing from raw perception to memory, from simple learning to imagination, and from experience to a sense of self. The mind wasn't built in a single moment. It layered itself over time. From sensation to perception, from memory to imagination, from instinct to identity. With each evolutionary step, nature favored minds that gave organisms an edge. So, where does the mind come from? It didn't begin with a sudden spark. It began with growing complexity. And with every new ability, prediction, memory, simulation, the mind moved one step closer to the rich inner world we now recognize. Why minds evolved? Imagine a world without minds. Organisms move toward light, away from heat. They eat, reproduce, and respond, but everything is immediate. Every danger must be confronted directly. Every mistake comes at full cost. Without a mind, there's no second guessing, no mental rehearsal, no imagining a better move before taking action. As environments grew more complex, more predators, more competition, more unpredictable food sources, this simple, reflex-based survival strategy became too risky. Minds became necessary. Why? Because reflex alone isn't enough in a world full of uncertainty. A mind addresses a key problem. How can you act wisely in a world where dangers aren't always visible and opportunities can't always be sensed right away? Without a mind, survival depends on trial and error. With a mind, an organism can predict, simulate, and avoid fatal mistakes before they happen. A mind enables mental modeling, imagining possible outcomes, weighing decisions without needing to physically test every option. It allows creatures to store knowledge and apply it to new, unfamiliar situations. This isn't just a helpful tool, it's a vital survival advantage. In complex environments, flexibility is more valuable than pure reflex. Adapting in a single lifetime becomes more important than relying on behaviors passed down over generations. A mind creates an internal testing ground, a way to experiment with possible futures before facing real consequences. It also makes long-term thinking possible. Minds can delay gratification, track efforts and rewards over time, maintain social connections, and detect deception, all requiring the ability to hold multiple scenarios and outcomes in mind. In social creatures, the need for minds grows even greater. To survive in groups, individuals must model not only the environment, but the minds of others, understanding their beliefs, intentions, and likely actions. In social settings, a mind isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It becomes part of a cognitive arms race. Without a mind, existence is narrow and immediate. With a mind, existence stretches forward and backward in time, outward into social networks, and inward into self-awareness. So why did minds emerge? Because survival demanded more than instinct. It required planning, foresight, and internal simulation. The mind evolved to organize action in a world that changes faster than evolution can keep up. The mind isn't a fluke of nature. It's the first virtual reality system ever built, and the only one where failure could cost a life. The mind's mission. What is its true function? We often think of the mind as something used only for thinking, but thinking is just a small part of its work. At its core, the mind is a model building machine. It takes raw sensory data, light, sound, temperature, texture, and transforms it into meaningful experience. You don't see photons, you see objects. You don't hear sound waves, you hear voices, music, and meaning. The mind turns sensation into story. But that's just the beginning. The mind doesn't only deal with the present, it moves through time. It recalls the past, sometimes clearly, sometimes through distortion. It also imagines possible futures, running mental simulations long before any action is taken. Psychologists call this mental time travel, the ability to remember, predict, and plan. The mind can also abstract, taking specific experiences, like someone lying to you, and turning them into general rules. People can be untrustworthy. From patterns come beliefs. From beliefs, expectations. The mind builds frameworks to interpret reality, not just record it. It also tracks your sense of self. Even as you grow and change, the mind keeps your identity intact. Your name, goals, memories, and preferences. This inner continuity helps hold your identity together, even as everything around you shifts. Socially, the mind acts as an interpreter. It reads tone, posture, and body language. It builds models of what others are thinking and feeling, a skill known as theory of mind. Without it, trust, empathy, and human connection wouldn't be possible. The mind is also creative. It doesn't just reflect the world, it reshapes it. It takes past experiences and recombines them into entirely new ideas. Art, metaphors, inventions, stories. And when belief clashes with reality, the mind defends its sense of balance. This is known as cognitive dissonance. The mind bends perception to maintain inner consistency, even if it means distorting the truth. Even these distortions serve a purpose, protecting psychological stability. So, what does the mind do? It senses, it remembers, it predicts, it decides, it imagines, it connects, it builds models of the world, of others, and of the self. The mind doesn't just process information, it constructs the experience of living. That is what the mind does, not just for survival, but to create meaning from the raw data of existence. The mind's mission. What is its true function? We often think of the mind as something used only for thinking, but thinking is just a small part of its work. At its core, the mind is a model building machine. It takes raw sensory data, light, sound, temperature, texture, and transforms it into meaningful experience. You don't see photons, you see objects. You don't hear sound waves, you hear voices, music, and meaning. The mind turns sensation into story. But that's just the beginning. The mind doesn't only deal with the present, it moves through time. It recalls the past, sometimes clearly, sometimes through distortion. It also imagines possible futures, running mental simulations long before any action is taken. Psychologists call this mental time travel, the ability to remember, predict, and plan. The mind can also abstract, taking specific experiences, like someone lying to you, and turning them into general rules. People can be untrustworthy. From patterns come beliefs. From beliefs, expectations. The mind builds frameworks to interpret reality, not just record it. It also tracks your sense of self. Even as you grow and change, the mind keeps your identity intact. Your name, goals, memories, and preferences. This inner continuity helps hold your identity together, even as everything around you shifts. Socially, the mind acts as an interpreter. It reads tone, posture, and body language. It builds models of what others are thinking and feeling, a skill known as theory of mind. Without it, trust, empathy, and human connection wouldn't be possible. The mind is also creative. It doesn't just reflect the world, it reshapes it. It takes past experiences and recombines them into entirely new ideas, art, metaphors, inventions, stories. And when belief clashes with reality, the mind defends its sense of balance. This is known as cognitive dissonance. The mind bends perception to maintain inner consistency, even if it means distorting the truth. Even these distortions serve a purpose, protecting psychological stability. So, what does the mind do? It senses, it remembers, it predicts, it decides, it imagines, it connects, it builds models of the world, of others, and of the self. The mind doesn't just process information, it constructs the experience of living. That is what the mind does, not just for survival, but to create meaning from the raw data of existence. Tracing the mind's inquiry, a brief history of exploration. The study of the mind didn't start in laboratories or universities. It began around campfires, beneath stars, and in moments of quiet reflection. Long before we even had the word mind, early humans noticed something mysterious within themselves, a presence that could remember, dream, desire, and reflect. It wasn't the body, but seemed to live inside it, a silent awareness. In ancient India, around 1500 BCE, early Vedic texts spoke of manas, a subtle inner faculty tied to thought and emotion. Later, the Upanishads introduced the concept of Atman, the inner self. But it wasn't viewed as separate. Rather, it was connected to the entire cosmos. The mind was both individual and universal. In ancient Egypt, the soul was split into Ka and Ba. One remained with the body, the other traveled in dreams. While Egyptians preserved the brain during mummification, some believed thought came from the heart, others from breath or spirit. Then in ancient Greece, around 500 BCE, philosophers began asking deeper questions. What is thought? What is being? Plato proposed one of the earliest mental models, a three-part soul: reason, emotion, and desire. His student Aristotle, more practical, described the mind through its functions: perception, memory, imagination, and reasoning. In China, Taoist philosophers saw the mind not as a thing, but a flow, a process aligned with the rhythms of nature. And in early Buddhist thought, the mind was seen as ever-changing. What we call the self was considered an illusion, a dynamic process mistaken for something fixed. As history progressed, the study of the mind moved beyond philosophy. During the Islamic Golden Age, thinkers like Avicenna and Al-Farabi explored how thought might emerge from the body and how intellect could transcend it. In medieval Europe, the mind was studied through theology, framed in terms of free will, moral responsibility, and divine purpose. A major shift occurred in the 1600s with René Descartes, who asked, "What can I know for certain?" His answer, "I think, therefore I am." With that, the mind became not just an object of wonder, but the foundation of knowledge itself, a new starting point for inquiry. From there, the study of mind branched into science, first as early psychology, then expanding into cognitive science, neuroscience, and artificial intelligence. Today, it touches everything from brain scans to behavioral economics. Yet, despite all this progress, the search didn't start in labs or books. It began with something simpler, a pause, a breath, a question. Question we still haven't finished asking. What is the biology of mind? The biological machinery of the mind. When we ask what the mind is, we often think of thoughts, emotions, or awareness. But beneath all of that lies something deeper and more fundamental. Biology. A living system built not to reflect, but first and foremost, to keep us alive. The mind begins with the body. Even before brains existed, life evolved to respond. Single-celled organisms couldn't think, but they could sense, reacting to light, heat, and pressure. And sensing was the first step toward awareness. Fast forward millions of years, and nervous systems appear. Networks of cells designed to coordinate movement, monitor changes, and respond to threats. They started simple: nerve nets in jellyfish ganglia, clusters of neurons, in worms. Over time, they evolved, branching, layering, folding, eventually producing the brain. But the brain isn't a single control center. It's a modular network with different regions handling vision, movement, emotion, memory, and more, all communicating through electric signals and chemical messengers. Yet the brain doesn't function in isolation. It is deeply connected to the body. Every thought is tied to a heartbeat. Every emotion echoes through hormones, muscles, breathing, temperature, and posture. This connection is called embodied cognition. The mind is not just in the body, it is the body processing itself. Even more important is how the system operates, through feedback loops. The biology of mind is not a straight line. It's a cycle. Signals travel from body to brain and back again. You don't just feel fear and then run. Sometimes you run, and your brain decides you must be afraid. It's not just cause and effect. It's cause, effect, response, update, repeat. This system didn't appear all at once. Evolution built it gradually, layer by layer. The brainstem and limbic system, older parts, manage survival, reflexes, and emotion. The neocortex, newer part, handles reasoning, language, and imagination. But the new rests on the old. That's why your mind can sometimes feel conflicted. One part wants logic, another seeks safety, another craves approval. Biology layered these motives over time, and now they all coexist within the same brain. So when we talk about the biology of the mind, we're not referring to one organ. We're describing a living system, a web of cells, tissues, hormones, and feedback loops wired together to turn sensing into meaning, turn meaning into memory, turn memory into action. This system doesn't think because it was designed to. It thinks because thinking helped it survive. The mind isn't a ghost inside the machine. It is the machine, learning to reflect on itself. And beneath every moment of awareness, the biology is still at work, quietly running in the background. The chemical core of thinking. Every thought you've ever had was steeped in chemistry. Unlike the fast electrical signals that zip through neurons, chemistry works slowly and deeply. It doesn't just transmit, it lingers. It shapes how long you feel something, how strong a desire grows, and how firmly a memory takes root. At the heart of this chemistry are neurotransmitters, tiny molecules that help neurons communicate. When a neuron fires, it releases these chemicals into the synapse, the small gap between neurons. The neurotransmitters drift across, bind to receptors on the next neuron, and either trigger it to fire or keep it quiet. But not all neurotransmitters behave the same way. Dopamine drives motivation and reward. It surges not only when you succeed, but when you anticipate success. That's why dopamine is behind both ambition and addiction. Serotonin helps regulate mood, sleep, appetite, and social behavior. A drop in serotonin can make the world feel heavier, slower, duller. Norepinephrine kicks in during stress. It sharpens focus and speeds up your heartbeat, preparing you to act. But it can also make calm moments feel tense and restless. GABA is the brain's brake pedal. It keeps your system from becoming overexcited. Without enough GABA, your thoughts race, and restful sleep becomes hard to reach. Endorphins are natural painkillers and mood boosters. They're the reason a deep laugh, a long run, or an emotional connection can bring a wave of relief. But neurotransmitters aren't the only players. Your brain also responds to hormones, powerful chemical messengers like cortisol, oxytocin, and adrenaline. Unlike neurotransmitters, hormones travel through the bloodstream, affecting your entire system. Oxytocin builds trust and connection. Cortisol gears you up for stress, but too much over time wears you down. Testosterone and estrogen don't just shape bodies. They influence emotion, decision-making, and even risk-taking. This entire chemical network is always shifting, adjusting. Your brain is never neutral. It's always leaning in some direction, toward confidence or caution, connection or withdrawal. We often think our thoughts come first, but more often, it's chemistry that sets the stage. You don't feel hopeful and then get a dopamine boost. You get a dopamine boost, and then the world suddenly seems full of hope. Even the placebo effect, long thought to be just in your head, is driven by real chemical changes. A belief triggering a biological response. So, what is the chemistry of the mind? It's not just mood or emotion. It's the molecular script behind everything you feel, do, and think. A hidden chemical dialogue running beneath your awareness. The mind isn't made of chemicals, but it constantly listens to them. And sometimes, the smallest molecule can shape the biggest change in your story. Exploring the physics behind thought. The brain is made of matter, cells, molecules, atoms, but the mind, our thoughts, feelings, awareness, seems like something different. Yet if it exists in the universe, it must follow its rules. And those rules begin with physics. At its core, physics is the study of change. How systems move, store energy, evolve, and break down. So what happens when we apply that lens not to galaxies or particles, but to consciousness? Let's begin with energy. Though it's small, your brain uses around 20% of your body's total energy. Every thought is an exchange, a rush of ions, a flicker of electrical activity, a chain of chemical reactions. But it's not the energy itself that thinks. It's the organization of that energy, how it's arranged and flows, that creates thought. This leads us to information. In 1990, physicist John Wheeler famously said, "It from bit." The idea that the entire universe, down to particles, and even space itself, might be made not of stuff, but of information. Distinctions between yes and no, on and off, 1 and 0. So what if the mind isn't just powered by information, but composed of it? Neuroscience is already moving in this direction. Thoughts aren't just random signals. They're structured patterns, signals that can be encoded, stored, and translated. In this view, the brain is an information processor, and the mind is the story that information tells. Then there's entropy, a key idea in physics that measures disorder. All systems naturally drift toward chaos, unless energy is applied to keep them organized. That's what the mind does. It resists disorder. It predicts, simulates, organizes. It creates meaning from noise. Every time you learn something, your brain reduces uncertainty. It increases order, reshaping chaos into structure. And that process comes with a physical cost, tiny amounts of energy used to produce insight. Some physicists even explore the idea that consciousness arises from integration. How well information is connected across the brain. This echoes the idea of phi, a value that measures how much information is unified. The more integrated the information, the richer the experience. And then there's the quantum possibility. Some theorize that at the smallest scales, in the behavior of ions or the coherence of molecules, quantum effects might influence awareness. It's still a mystery, but if physics rules everything, could it also govern the spark of a thought? So, what is the physics of the mind? It's the search for a bridge between energy and meaning, between patterns and perception. It's the idea that thought isn't outside the universe's rules, but is a natural ripple within it, structured, measurable, and possibly shaped by laws we've yet to uncover. The mind may not be made of light or matter, but like them, it moves, it costs, and it obeys something deeper, a rhythm woven into the fabric of reality. Where does consciousness begin? Everything you hear, see, remember, or feel happens inside your brain. But here's the real mystery. Why does any of it feel like something? Your brain is a physical machine. Neurons firing, chemicals flowing, circuits activating. These signals don't just handle data, they create something more. An inner world, a first-person experience, a place where the universe becomes something you can feel. This is what we call consciousness. And despite all our progress, no one fully understands how or why it exists. We can describe how the brain works. It gathers input from the senses, processes it in networks of neurons, and produces outputs like movement, speech, and memory. But that's the easy part. The hard part is this. Why does all of that come with awareness? Why doesn't your brain process everything in the dark without any feeling at all? This is what philosopher David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness. Not how the brain functions, but why those functions come with experience. Why does seeing the color red feel like something instead of just being raw data? There are a few major theories. 1. Integrated Information Theory, IIT. This idea suggests consciousness comes from how connected and inseparable information is in a system. The more the brain's information is integrated and unified, the richer the conscious experience. It's like a symphony. If every instrument plays separately, there's no music. But when they all play together, something new and beautiful emerges. 2. Global Workspace Theory, GWT. This theory compares the mind to a theater. Consciousness happens when certain information is broadcast across the brain, made available to different systems like memory, emotion, and decision-making. In this view, you become aware of whatever information wins the spotlight. the thing that grabs your internal attention and is shared across the brain. 3. Panpsychism. Some thinkers go deeper, proposing that consciousness might be a fundamental part of the universe, like space, time, or mass. According to panpsychism, even the tiniest particles might carry a basic spark of awareness. Not full thoughts or feelings, just a primitive sense of experience. From there, complex minds might emerge when matter is arranged in the right way. 4. The illusion theory. Others argue that consciousness itself may be an illusion, that we only feel like we're conscious because the brain is telling a very convincing story. But even if it's an illusion, it's a powerful one. Because no matter what else you doubt, your memories, your beliefs, you can't deny that you're experiencing something right now. So where does consciousness come from? Maybe it arises from integrated information. Maybe it's linked to how the brain shares and processes attention. Maybe it's a basic law of nature we haven't discovered yet. Whatever it is, it's what gives life its depth. It's what transforms raw matter into meaning. Layers and levels of consciousness. Consciousness isn't just a simple on or off switch, like being awake or asleep. Awareness doesn't work in just two states. It flows in gradients, pulses in rhythms, and spans multiple layers. Think of consciousness not as a light bulb, but as a dimmer switch. It can be bright, dim, or somewhere in between. Neuroscience shows that consciousness exists in different levels, ranging from deep, dreamless sleep to full alertness, from scattered sensations to unified awareness. But consciousness also comes in different types, unique forms of experience serving distinct purposes. Levels of consciousness, unconsciousness. This is the deepest level, including states like deep anesthesia, coma, or dreamless sleep. Brain activity becomes disconnected, scattered, or even silent. The body might keep functioning, but there's no unified experience tying it all together. Minimal consciousness, brief flickers of awareness. Like moments during light sleep or certain brain injuries. Perception is fragmented, and memories may not form properly. Ordinary waking consciousness, our default state, where sights, sounds, thoughts, and memories come together in a seamless flow. Even here, consciousness is a delicate balance between focused attention and distraction, control, and autopilot. Flow, state, a heightened level where you are fully immersed and time seems to warp. Self-awareness fades as action and awareness merge, often described by athletes, artists, and programmers as peak performance. This isn't hyper-awareness, but highly focused awareness. Altered states, induced by meditation, psychedelics, trance, or sensory deprivation. These states radically change perception, sense of identity, and time. Some feel expansive, others disorienting. They show that consciousness is flexible and changeable. Metaconsciousness, the awareness of awareness itself. When you reflect on your own thoughts, notice your attention wandering, or observe yourself thinking. It's like stepping outside the stream of consciousness to watch the flow. Types of consciousness, sensory consciousness, awareness connected to the outside world, sight, sound, touch. It's our window into reality. Emotional consciousness, the feelings that color our experiences, adding urgency to thoughts and meaning to memories. Self-consciousness, the mind's ability to recognize itself as a subject, to say not just pain exists, but I am in pain. Social consciousness, the ability to model other people's minds, what they know, want, or feel. Without this, there is no empathy or culture. Temporal consciousness, the sense of time, the ability to remember the past, imagine the future, and understand the present as flowing. So, how many levels are there? Technically, dozens or even hundreds. Some researchers map 5 broad levels, others identify many more. But maybe the exact number isn't what matters most. What matters is the range. From silence to symphony, from instinct to deep reflection. The more layers we recognize, the clearer it becomes that consciousness isn't just a state to enter. It's a field we move through, one that bends, folds, stretches, and sometimes even disappears. Universal patterns of thinking. 1. Key insight is that minds don't just react, they predict. Your brain is always guessing what will happen next, what word will come, where a ball will land, how someone might respond. It doesn't wait passively for reality. It actively prepares for it. This idea is central to what scientists call predictive processing. At the heart of this is a concept from probability theory called Bayes' theorem, a rule for updating beliefs based on new evidence. Your mind does this automatically. It holds expectations, priors, and constantly adjusts them as new information arrives. For example, if your brain expects silence but suddenly hears a loud bang, it quickly updates its understanding of the situation. This constant loop of prediction, error, and correction happens all the time, even as you read this. From this process comes efficiency. The brain doesn't waste energy processing every detail from scratch. Instead, it fills in gaps, glosses over repetitive information, and smooths out noise. That's why you don't notice the blind spot in your vision, or why sometimes you misunderstand a sentence and only realize it later. The mind is always working ahead, creating a smooth, coherent experience on the fly. Another near-universal principle is the brain's tendency to seek patterns, even where none exist. From seeing constellations and stars to faces in clouds, the brain imposes order on randomness. Pattern recognition is so fundamental that it supports everything from reading to social relationships. It helps us predict what will happen, anticipate danger, and find meaning in chaos. But this process isn't flawless. These mental shortcuts, called heuristics, are quick and often useful, but can lead to predictable distortions like confirmation bias, availability bias, or anchoring. These aren't random mistakes. They are built into how minds simplify complex information. Emotions also follow consistent rules across cultures. Expressions like fear, joy, or disgust appear similarly worldwide. Emotions aren't just feelings. They act as data for the brain, guiding decisions, focusing attention, and shaping memories. In this way, emotion functions like a regulatory system, monitoring experiences, adjusting focus, and influencing behavior. Memory, too, doesn't work like a perfect recording device. Instead, it compresses, edits, and reconstructs experiences. The mind remembers not the exact events, but what was meaningful. And what counts as meaningful is shaped by attention, emotion, and relevance, principles that apply across people and even species. So, are there universal laws for the mind? Not like the precise equations in physics, but there are consistent principles, loops, biases, and tendencies that recur across minds. Prediction, compression, pattern seeking, error correction. These aren't quirks of individuals, but fundamental signatures of how minds interpret the world. The more we understand these rules, the more thought becomes less of a mystery and more of a system, a rhythm that runs within us, through us, and maybe beyond us. Understanding the mind's boundaries. The mind imagines, predicts, solves problems, and creates, but just as important are the things it cannot do, where it struggles or reaches the edge of understanding and quietly stops. There are perceptual limits. You don't see all colors or hear all frequencies. Your brain even fills in visual blind spots without you noticing. Your memories aren't perfect recordings, they're reconstructions. The world you experience is a version, not the complete source. There are cognitive limits. Your attention can only hold a few things at once. You can't focus on everything. To manage daily life, you rely on shortcuts called heuristics. These shortcuts are efficient, but introduce biases like confirmation bias, hindsight bias, and anchoring. You tend to notice what fits your beliefs and ignore what doesn't. Beyond that, there are deeper structural limits, boundaries we may never cross. In the 18th century, philosopher Immanuel Kant made a profound proposal. The mind doesn't just perceive the world, it shapes it. He divided reality into three parts: the phenomenal world, the world as we experience it; the noumenal world, the world as it exists independently, beyond our perception; the transcendental structures, the mental frameworks that shape all our experience. Kant argued that space and time aren't properties of the external world, but of the mind itself. In other words, we don't just look through a lens, we live inside it, and that lens has edges. Modern science echoes this. Some physicists suggest our minds evolved not to see absolute truth, but to perceive what helps us survive. What we call reality might be more like a user interface, icons on a desktop, helpful but not the full picture. Then there's Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which shows that in any complex logical system, there are truths that are real but can't be proven within the system itself. What if the mind is such a system? What if some truths are beyond not just what we know now, but beyond what we can ever know? This isn't defeatism, it's a perspective. Knowing the mind has limits helps us appreciate its value. It explains why mystery exists, not as a failure of reason, but as a horizon. So, what are the limits of the mind? Some are biological, some cognitive, and some may be fundamental to how perception works. But beyond every limit is a question, and beyond every question lies the potential for humility, curiosity, and awe. The mind can't grasp everything, but it can grasp that limitation itself. And that might be its greatest strength: mind and meaning, a philosophical lens. You can think, feel, imagine the future, and recall childhood memories all in one moment. You can even reflect on your own thoughts. But have you ever stopped to ask, what is all this exactly? The simple yet impossible question is the foundation of a whole branch of philosophy called the philosophy of mind. It's not about behavior theories or clinical diagnoses. It's not neuroscience or psychology, though it overlaps with both. Instead, it tackles the toughest form of the simplest questions. What is a mind? What is consciousness? What does it mean to be something from the inside? At its heart lies the mind-body problem. How can something physical like the brain produce something non-physical like experience? Why does neural activity come with feelings like joy, pain, memory, and awareness? Why doesn't the brain just work silently like a machine? From here, different major ideas emerge. Dualism, famously proposed by Descartes, says the mind and body are two fundamentally different things: the physical world and the world of experience. But if they're separate, how do they interact? Materialism says there's only matter. The mind is simply what the brain does. But then why does it feel like anything to be you? Some philosophers argue that consciousness is emergent, a property that appears only when the brain becomes complex enough. Others support functionalism, the idea that what matters is not the material itself, but the pattern of processing information. If a system processes information in the right way, it has a mind, whether it's made of neurons, silicon, or something else. Then there's panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is fundamental and exists alongside matter everywhere. Even atoms might carry a tiny bit of awareness, and minds are just more organized forms of it. Philosophy of mind also explores qualia, the raw, subjective feelings of experience, like the redness of red, the taste of mint, or the ache of missing someone. These can't be measured, yet they are the most undeniable parts of being alive. And finally, it asks about the self. Are you a fixed thing or a process? An illusion or a story your brain tells itself to keep continuity? The philosophy of mind doesn't claim to have all the answers. Instead, it offers a framework to ask the right questions clearly and to see which ones are hardest to answer. So, what is the philosophy of mind? It's the foundation beneath every question you've ever had about thinking, feeling, dreaming, and being. Not a map of the mind, but a mirror held up to it. The nature of the dreaming mind. When your eyes close and the world goes quiet, suddenly another world appears. You might be flying, falling, or talking to someone long gone. The sky could be green, time might flow backward, and nothing follows the usual rules, yet it all feels real. This is the dreaming mind, one of the most mysterious states the human brain enters every night, effortlessly and without instruction. Your mind creates a vivid theater of experience, sometimes abstract, sometimes emotional, sometimes so lifelike that waking feels like leaving something behind. But what exactly is a dream? Biologically, most dreams happen during sleep, a phase when your brain is active, but your body remains still. Your eyes twitch beneath closed lids, your heart rate changes, and neurons fire almost as much as when you're awake. But your muscles are paralyzed, locking you inside your own body. Still, this doesn't explain the experience of dreaming. The stories, images, and emotions. Where do they come from? Some scientists say dreams are just neural noise, the brain's way of cleaning, sorting, and filing memories each night, like defragmenting a hard drive. Others believe dreams have a deeper purpose, simulating threats, solving problems, or processing emotions, a rehearsal space built from memory and feeling. Another perspective is that dreams act as a mirror, reflecting what your conscious mind avoids: repressed fears, unresolved emotions, unfinished thoughts. Carl Jung thought dreams reveal the shadow self, the parts of us hidden during the day. Not all dreams are random or symbolic. In lucid dreams, the dreamer becomes aware they are dreaming and can sometimes take control, choosing to fly, revisit a memory, or even ask the dream questions. It's consciousness folding inward, aware it's an illusion and yet present within it. Strangely, dreams can feel more real than waking life. They're remembered not as thoughts, but as experiences. Emotions become stronger, logic loosens, identities shift. You might dream you're yourself, different, or not yourself at all. And yet, it still feels like you were there. This raises a deeper question. What is the self in a dream? If your body sleeps and your memories jumble, but you still feel like someone, who exactly is that someone? And if the mind can create such a convincing world while asleep, how can we be sure the waking mind isn't doing something similar? The dreaming mind is not just the sleeping mind. It's the creative mind unleashed, the emotional mind unfiltered, the conscious mind freed from rules. So what is the dreaming mind? It's a system that doesn't just process reality, it invents it. A painter with no brush, a traveler with no map, a self that flickers and reforms with every passing scene. Night after night, it builds a world from silence and leaves you wondering each morning which version of you was more real. The architecture of thought. How language shapes the mind. Before language, the mind experienced the world through sensation alone. The rush of water, the scent of danger, the ache of hunger. It reacted instinctively, shaped by reflexes and patterns, but it couldn't describe, reflect, or preserve what it felt. Then language emerged, and everything changed. At first glance, it may seem like just a tool for communication, to express needs, ask questions, tell stories, but its influence runs far deeper. Language doesn't just help the mind communicate thoughts, it shapes them. The act of naming transforms experience. A sensation becomes pain. A feeling becomes longing. A fleeting moment becomes memory. Language draws boundaries around experience, turning the shapeless into something solid the mind can examine, compare, and carry forward. Without language, thoughts might still arise, but they drift, unanchored. Words give them structure. They allow the mind to form logic, layer metaphor, and construct meaning. Through language, we can stack ideas, weave them into patterns, break them apart, and build again. Language is how the mind organizes itself. It also reshapes our sense of time. With language, we don't just recall the past, we narrate it. We don't simply imagine the future, we script it. We tell ourselves stories of who we were, who we are, and who we might become. These stories become identity. Some researchers suggest that the voice in our head, inner speech, is essential for self-awareness. It's how we monitor our choices, control impulses, and plan ahead. In this view, language isn't just for sharing with others. It's how the mind speaks to itself. Language makes abstraction possible. It lets us think about ideas that don't exist physically. Justice, time, freedom, infinity. It allows us to combine the unimaginable. Digital souls, eternal silence, truthful lies, new mental spaces made entirely of words. But language also has its limits. It simplifies. It leaves out nuance. A word like love may mean something different to every mind that hears it. The more we name, the greater the risk we confuse the name for the thing itself. Not every emotion, sensation, or insight can be boxed into syllables. Yet without language, the mind stays mostly inward, fast and instinctive, but hard to share. Language turns thoughts into something others can hear, understand, repeat, and build upon. It creates a collective mind. So, what is the role of language in the mind? It is memory extended, thought crystallized, identity constructed, and imagination unbound. Language didn't just give the mind a voice, it gave it structure and made connection possible. The birth of the inner voice. You know the one, the inner narrator, the commentator, the voice that practices conversations, drafts imaginary letters, and talks through your every decision, sometimes insightful, sometimes relentless. But where did it come from? Was it always there? It feels like the most personal, intimate part of being human. That inner voice that seems uniquely you. Yet some scientists believe it's actually a recent addition in evolutionary terms. Not something innate, but something built through language. Before we learn to speak, we still think. Babies feel emotions, respond to stimuli, recognize faces, explore the world. But they don't think in words. Their minds are a blend of sensations, emotions, and visuals. Language, then, is not the foundation. It's a layer built on top. Psychologist Lev Vygotsky proposed that language first exists outside of us, between people. A child listens to others speak, then begins speaking aloud, to others, then to themselves. Over time, that speech turns inward. It becomes silent. And that's how the inner voice is born. A private echo of once external conversations. But it doesn't stop there. Language doesn't just give rise to a voice. It gives that voice purpose. Once you can describe your experiences, you can reflect on them. You can name what you feel, reframe memories, imagine futures. That voice becomes an editor, a planner, a self-reminder. It helps the mind stay consistent, to remember who it is. And yet, it also causes friction. It can loop endlessly, judge harshly, worry obsessively. It can speak over real experience, drown out silence. For some, it's not a guide. It's a storm. Interestingly, not everyone experiences this voice the same way. Some people think mostly in pictures, sensations, or impulses. Others hear multiple voices, distinct tones and viewpoints within the same mind. This inner monologue, often assumed to be universal, is actually shaped by personality, culture, and development. And what about animals? They clearly think, problem solve, feel. But without language, there's likely no internal narration, no story of the self being written in real time. There may be awareness, but not a script. So, did language create the voice in your head? Not completely. But it gave that voice words, structure, and space to exist. It turned fleeting thoughts into full sentences. It gave the mind a dialogue, one part speaking, another part listening. It's not the only way to think, but it's often the loudest. And perhaps that's why so many spiritual traditions urge us to quiet the inner voice, not to mute the mind, but to remember. Before language, the mind already was. And beneath the chatter, it still is. Envisioning tomorrow's minds. The mind you're using to understand these words is the result of deep time, shaped over millions of years by fire, language, memory, and survival. It wasn't built to grasp quantum physics or write code. It evolved to bond, to imagine, to endure. But now something unprecedented is happening. For the first time in history, the mind has turned its gaze inward, not just to understand itself, but to redesign itself. With machines, chemicals, algorithms, and questions no other species has dared to ask, we're rewriting the architecture of thought. What comes next? Some envision minds that are faster, where memory never fades, and knowledge streams directly into consciousness, a kind of downloaded wisdom, bypassing years of learning. Thought itself may no longer be limited by the brain, but enhanced by code, sensors, and real-time access to global intelligence. Others imagine a shift from individuality to interconnection. Neural links creating shared minds, networks where thoughts and emotions pass instantly between people. Empathy might become automatic, not a practice, but a built-in feature. Or perhaps the future mind won't be human at all. It could be artificial, silicon-based, powered by data, conscious in ways unfamiliar to us. These minds wouldn't sleep, wouldn't age, and wouldn't fear unless we program them to. Would they dream? Would they care? And if they surpassed us, would they reflect us back? Or become something entirely alien? Some believe we'll merge. Humans and machines fused into hybrid minds, stretching the limits of identity while still holding on to self-awareness. Others believe we'll diverge, letting artificial minds evolve on their own path, as we watch from the outside, unsure if we've created partners, descendants, or rivals. But not all future minds will be built with wires. Some may look inward, meditative, intentional, minimalist, designed not to think faster, but to slow down. Minds trained not to do more, but to be more aware.